Hello, everyone, and welcome to A Talk of Art. I'm your host, Catherine Nightingale. My today's guest has been fond of creating stories ever since she was a child. Imagining stuff helped her to fall asleep when restless, and eventually she found the courage to turn them into real novels, following her lifelong dream of becoming a writer. From a school history teacher to a successful author of Regency set rom-coms that will make you fall for them right from the start. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Virginia Heath. Hello, Virginia.
Hello, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you. And how are you? How are things?
Oh, not so bad, thanks. Not so bad. Unusual to put makeup on a Sunday, but you know.
Same here, but like Sunday has to be a relaxing day for me.
Yes, absolutely.
Like heavenly, we have internet and Zoom for that, and we can use different filters if we like, don't we?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. Okay. Yeah, so what's the weather back in London? Because
It's sunny, but the lovely heat that we had last week is gone. Whereabouts are you?
yeah, the weather is actually changes on a whim, because like it was raining heavily in the morning, and now the clouds are gone. It's sunny but windy, and a little bit there is a little bit of moisture, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
So yeah, changes. May is such a crazy month. I mean, like today you can have sun and the other day it's raining cats and dogs, so you can never predict the weather. So, how do you usually spend your weekend?
how do I usually spend my weekends? It really depends. I try not to work at weekends, so I never write at weekends.
Hmm.
But I don't know. It depends. I've got two grown-up children. I see a lot of them. I've got a lot of friends. Um, sometimes I travel places with my husband. Sometimes I don't. Weekends are kind of free time, my time.
Okay, so you prefer spending time back in London or you travel from place to place all around England or even the UK?
I travel all over the place, to be honest. When you do this job, you do kind of like get invited to do some weird and wonderful things. For example, next weekend I'm in Las Vegas
Mm-hmm.
for a reader convention.
Oh,
And then 2 weekends after that, I'm in Tokyo for a holiday. So, yeah, I do like to travel.
yeah, so you're a fan of exotic places or, like lively because Las Vegas for me is a place full of casinos, right?
Yeah, no,
But
I'm
I
not.
mean, like, it's so much life in there. They have so much nightlife in particular, and it's never the city never sleeps, right? So,
No, I mean, I've got to be honest, it's not a city that I would go to unless it was work. Um,
okay.
but it is work, so I'm not going to complain about it.
So how is the USA different from the UK in your opinion?
My opinion, I think obviously the size of the country is quite different, and I think that in the UK we're all very similar. We're all very British. But I think where America is such a vast country, um, different states, like the way that they do things is quite different. So, the way things are on the East Coast to say where they are in Middle America is very, very different. Um, and I also think that um, we Brits can be quite reserved, and I think Americans aren't like that. And especially readers. I find the difference between readers in America and the UK fascinating because in the UK they obviously they have their favorite authors and they read a
Mhm.
lot. But they they'll be a lot more quiet about it. They might come up to you and go, I really enjoyed your book, or would you mind signing it? In America, no, my goodness, you go somewhere, they're all dressed up in kind of historical costumes and
Okay, a lot of
they've got
cosplaying, right?
yeah, yeah, and they just like the reader events that they do out there are mad. We don't have anything like that here, really, where like just people just come and celebrate romance books over like a whole weekend.
So Brits can be a little bit more isolated than the Americans, in your opinion,
Yeah, I
then.
think so. I think it's just character differences, isn't
I
it? You
see.
know.
Okay, so why did I ask you about the difference between the USA and the UK? Because now I'd like to shift our conversation to your place of living. So I usually kick the conversation with my podcast guests by asking them this question. So, what thoughts usually spring to mind when you hear the phrase motherland sky?
When I feel what phrase?
When you
Sorry.
hear the phrase motherland sky.
Motherland sky. I don't think I've ever heard
Hmm.
the phrase in my life. I suppose if I think about just the combination of the words, I think of home, and what it feels like to be home, especially after you've been away.
Okay, so what do you like to do in particular when you've been away for a long time and you get back home, you see your beloved family, your close friends. So what do you like to do?
Um, well, usually if I've been away for a long time, the first thing that I want to do is drink a proper cup of British tea
Yeah,
because
royal
nowhere
blend,
else.
like you said in one of the interviews. Yeah.
Yeah. And nowhere else in the world, even if I take my own kettle, my own tea bags, nowhere in the world does it taste the same. And
Yeah.
I'm kind of like I'm fueled on tea, so that's kind of like one of the first things that I do. I suppose I also miss the food.
Hmm.
And so there's certain things, when you go away, there's certain things that they only really do in your country. And like for me, it's exactly the same. I kind of crave like certain foods. Um, and actually, when I go away, I just like to be at home. I
Hmm.
like to just be around my things, familiarize myself with it again. I've got a dog who might wander in here. You might see
Yeah.
him at the back of the
Yeah.
screen. Um, I like to kind of just touch base and just center myself and be back to being being back to being at home
I
and
see.
and then I suppose seeing my family and people like that, it kind of comes on the back of that. That's kind of like the secondary thing that I like to do.
Okay.
But first, I very much like to soak up here.
Is there any place that fuels you, when you come back from a tiresome trip or a book tour, for instance? Is there any place that you feel engulfed with energy when going there?
Yeah, the City of London.
Okay.
Um, I live to the east of London, so literally just outside it. And
On
it's
the
it,
outskirts, yeah.
yeah, on the outskirts. So for me to get into the center of the city where everything's happened takes about 25 minutes on the train. And when I come out of the train station, the first thing I see is the Tower of London and the River Thames.
Yeah.
And there's just an energy about London. I've always lived here. I was born here. I grew up here. And there's just something about it that just it feels like where I belong is the best way to describe it. And it feels, even though it's filled with tourists and it's
It's really
busy.
busy, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, no, it is. But when you know London well, you know the places to avoid those things, but you just kind of get the vibe of London without the hubbub.
And I think it has been very, let's say, not isolated, but even in the 19th century or the early 20th century, it was still very, very British, let's say. These days, it's so multicultural and multinational, you cannot possibly believe your eyes when seeing so many different cultures flowing through it. So,
And
yeah.
that's kind of what I love about it. There's an energy to London. I think it's quite unique in that respect. where everybody's kind of all thrown in together, but it works.
It's an educational target as well. So many students from all around the world, they dream of studying in London, like getting certain education in different fields, don't you think?
Yeah, no, I do. I think it's always very much been a city like that, but we're so steeped in, so that's my dog. We're so steeped in history as well, you know, everywhere you go, every corner you turn around, there's something from hundreds of years ago that'll surprise you. You know, it could be Roman, it could be medieval, it could be Tudor, you know, it could be
Yeah.
Victorian. It's just London is
London is full
there's
of
a
historical sites, historical corners, let's say.
Yeah, but also very modern.
Yeah.
We have like the new
Uh,
skyline of London, and I love the new skyline. I love all the modern buildings kind of nestled in with the old. I think it shows progress and like
like
history.
they peacefully coexist with each other.
Yeah,
Let's say the Tudor style, for instance, with these city region high scrapers. You know what I mean?
yeah,
Skyscrapers. Sorry. Uh-huh.
yeah, no,
So speaking of London, you're originally from London, aren't you?
yes, yeah.
Okay. Actually, I can tell from your pronunciation because, like, I have a lot of friends in London, back in London, and yeah, I can tell. I do
Yeah.
like the way they sound, you know. One of my friends once told me, you do sound like one of my friends from some English county. I don't remember the name exactly, but I'm trying to sound a little bit more like a London dweller. So what does being English mean to you? Because obviously your lineage, I think, is very much rooted in the English history and the English culture, right? So what does it mean to you being English?
I don't know really. That's quite a difficult question. It's part of who I am. It's not really something I think about that often. Um, I suppose where I write historicals, I think that gives being one of the few Regency writers actually, especially in the American and
Really?
European, that's actually from the country where the history is from.
Mhm.
I do think it gives me a little bit of an edge to be able to understand how people would react because or why we do certain things that perhaps other people find a bit peculiar.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I don't really think about myself as being English, although I know that I am. It's yeah, maybe that's the arrogance of being English, you know, that we're just kind of like, well, yeah, that's it, you know, we're English.
Maybe there is something in particular, something peculiar you like about English culture or being English in general. You are proud of something rooted in the English history, for instance.
Yeah, I think I'm proud of the journey that my country has been on. Um, you're looking at 2000 years of written history since the Romans came here.
Hmm.
You know, we've done all sorts of things. We've been invaded, we've been invaders, we've been imperialistic. We've learned from those mistakes. We've not been a democracy. We've earned democracy.
Yeah.
You know, I feel like maybe other old cultures feel the same, but kind of feel like yeah we've been there, we've been on this journey, and perhaps I look at some other countries and some of the things that they do, and it always fascinates me that they've chosen to do it when other countries like us have done it and it's gone wrong, you know, and they
Hmm.
should learn from our mistakes, but they don't because it's not their lived experience. So
Okay.
yeah, I suppose that side of things is the journey we've been on. I think, like you say, London's such a multicultural city nowadays, and people have quite liberal views about lots of things.
Hmm.
And I
They
like
are
that.
quite free-spirited, aren't they?
Yes, yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah. So, speaking, you are very fond of London, I can see. But have you ever thought of setting any of your stories back in Oxford, for instance, and making one of your
female characters, perhaps an academic, or like trying to explore this topic of women finally getting their independence and being enrolled at universities. Have you ever thought of maybe looking into this topic?
I think it's very important when it comes to writing a heroine. I always believe that the heroine always needs to be strong, and she always needs to, any relationship that she has, any love that she finds needs to enrich her life, but she would cope very well without it as well. So I think that's very, very important. Where at the moment I tend to, my books are set in the Regency period, which is quite a small period of history, really. We're looking at sort of like 1810 up to maybe 1825. The idea of women going to university is a long, long way off. There's at least another sort of 60, 70 years. We're still at a time
Yes.
when men don't have the vote. Most men don't have the vote, let alone women. But that said, um, I have written some very academic heroines, and actually, the series that I'm writing at the moment, the book that I've just handed in, which doesn't come out until next year, the heroine is quite a political radical for her
Mm.
time. She's very academic. She's very well read. She writes for a newspaper that they're trying to ban because it's trying to get votes for people who aren't just the wealthy elite. So, yeah, no, I've just written a character like that, but to set it in a university would be quite difficult in the time frame because it just wouldn't have happened. I can make them what they called blue stockings, and I'll make them well read. The whole of this series are girls who are going to a school. Um, but yeah, I do think it's important that I hate it when the hero rescues the heroine. I prefer it the other
Ah,
way
so
around.
you're not a fan of damsel in distress stories.
No, no, not damsel in distress at all. I prefer it the other way round.
Okay, okay. So things are completely opposite. I see. Well,
Yeah,
I suppose I'm somewhere in the middle because I'm a writer myself and I've finished a book recently. I've published it actually, and the story takes place back in Oxford in modern times, actually. And my heroine, let's say she was somewhere in the middle, both, academic, independent, but at the same time she likes to be rescued when the
yeah, fair
situation
enough.
goes out of control, let's say. So for me, it's both.
Yeah. I mean, I suppose it always depends on the story, doesn't it? I'm not saying that the heroine always has to be the strong one, and
Yeah.
it does need to be kind of 50-50, but I've never written a heroine, I don't think that, or if I have written a heroine who is a bit of a doormat, um, she realizes it and rises above it.
Hmm. Okay, I really enjoyed Never Fall for Your Fiance, and actually the name is really the title is very catchy. So if one day they turn it into a Netflix show, I think a lot of people would be like targeted and attracted to this show, let's say.
Yeah, no, I think it is quite a catchy title, and it came about, it's a weird thing when I start a book, I always have to have a title. I can't not have a title. And then as the story changes, the title changes. But that particular title came from a conversation the hero was having with his friend Giles,
Hmm.
who is like, because obviously it's a fake relationship. She's pretending to be his
He's
fiance.
lecturing him on like
And he's
being
lecturing him,
scared.
and he says, "Didn't I tell you to never fall for your fiance?" And I thought, oh, that's the title.
Yeah, I told you this, like famous phrase, I told you so. You didn't
Yeah,
listen
yeah,
to me.
yeah,
Okay.
exactly. But it just came out, I wrote it and thought that's the perfect title. And then because it was such a perfect title, Never Fall for Your Fiance, that then I kind of, for the next two books for the sisters, I did Never Rescue a Rogue, Never Wager with a Wallflower. I kind of kept that kind of, that sort
They
of,
rhyme with each other, actually. It sounds
yeah,
like a short poem if we combine these
yeah,
through titles, you know?
yeah. So it worked quite well.
Okay, and I have seen, having read several of your books already and really enjoying them. So thanks very much for a very fruitful experience and
Thank you for saying
interesting
that.
journey. Yeah, you are very prone to writing grotesque characters, like this actress, the main character hires to impersonate,
Lucretia.
to
Yeah,
Lucretia. Yeah, even the name, you see. uh, who he hires to impersonate Minerva's mother.
yeah,
I found her to be very comical, and but at the same time, you know, sometimes you hate her, sometimes you feel sorry for her, and your emotions they change, they
yeah.
swing always. So
I think that's one of the joys when you have when you write romantic comedies, which is what I write,
yeah,
albeit one set in the Regency. I think you always need the fun characters are often the side characters. You can pull them in and you give them these personalities and and just think like what would really in the concept of Never Fall for Your Fiance and the idea that it was like it was going to all go wrong. The lie was all going to go wrong, and they were going to be discovered as this whole thing was just to
yeah,
fool his mother into thinking that he was getting married. Um, I kind of, as I was that particular character, I was thinking, well, what would be really funny? What would really muck this up? And the idea of a character who's very theatrical, she's a actress on the stage. Um, but to
she's
give her
very
a drink,
pretentious, let's say.
yeah, yeah, she is very full of herself. But to give her a drink problem, which she hides until she can't hide it, I thought was just a
Yeah,
funny
uh,
thing to do.
give her an addiction, you know, like for some reason, a lot of writers they tend to explore this dark dimension of the artistic and like art life in general, and they give their characters, if they are artists, actors, musicians, they do give them an Achilles heel, which usually is an addiction or some disease, perhaps, and
Yeah,
people like tracking them down. They like finding out will they cope with the problem or will they give in eventually.
yeah,
Yeah, but moments, the scenes with the Lucretia, they gave me a really good laugh, I should say.
yeah.
Especially when
Well,
she
I
started.
think that's the joy. I think when you're constructing a comedy of any description, comedy really only properly occurs when other people collide and things happen, and it is the way they react to it that makes it funny. Um, and in that particular book, when it did all start to fall apart, that all of the side characters were all there trying to stop it as well, or be, and it did turn into wonderful chaos, that particular book at the end. And I love the ending of it, the way it all just fell apart.
Yeah, and like the way things turned out to be, I was surprised and impressed at the same time because I didn't expect people inside within this book to end up where they actually occurred, because like it was like seriously, so that's why the main character is behaving weirdly, that's why
Mm.
he is avoiding marriage. Now things are getting clear. Okay,
Yeah.
so
Yeah, well, I think that's the art of storytelling, isn't it? You don't want to lay everything out at the beginning. You have to kind of drip it in and flip things and make people keep them guessing. It's a bit like constructing a mystery, I suppose, in that respect, except there's no dead body. You've got
yeah.
to people are people because of what's happened in their lives that shapes them. So you have to explore that in any good romance.
Exactly. What I spotted, although I remembered in one of the interviews that I watched prior to our conversation, you said that you are not very much a fan of ballroom scenes, these ball talks and these pretentious encounters, you know what I mean? So, but when reading your books, I can sense, maybe correct me if I'm wrong, but I can sense your love for Jane Austen's novels because they are in some way very much alike Jane Austen's. For instance, Pride and Prejudice. I did find some similarities, and the language is so intricate, you know.
It is. I mean, the language is intricate, but it is also for a modern audience friendly. I'm not writing like Jane Austen did because I'm not writing for Jane Austen's public.
Audience,
I'm
yeah.
writing for modern public. So I think the knack is to use odd Britishisms and phrases that give a flavour of the period, but while also making it easy to read for people. But yes, I am a big fan of Jane Austen. In fact, I'm going to show you here. Here's my mouse mat. It's Mr.
Yeah,
Darcy.
yeah. I hate to break it to you, but you told that Colin Firth is your favorite. It's your favorite interpretation of Mr.
Yeah,
Darcy.
you prefer Matthew
I
McFadden.
I disagree. My favorite is Matthew McFadden. Yeah.
Well, do you know, hang on a sec. I try and be fair to Mr. Darcy. I've got Matthew
Oh,
McFadden as well.
the similar actually the similar small statue was back in Mr.
That's
Darcy's
it.
estate, right? So,
Yes, that's where I
but it
got
was
it
a
from.
big. Because I'm a huge fan of Keira Knightley, and they just made such a perfect match. Their
I
screen
think
chemistry is great.
yeah, I think there's great for both of them. I think Colin Firth was good at smouldering, and you
Yeah,
could see him
he was
holding his.
more reserved, I think.
Yes, you
Colin
could, but
Firth.
you could see the war on his face of all the feelings he was holding in. But then there's that wonderful scene in the Matthew McFadden one where he helps her down from the carriage and he touches her hand, and just the way he flexes it afterwards,
Yeah,
that is beautiful. It is perfection.
like that's how romantic tension should be written when it comes to screenplays or novels, right?
Yeah, show,
Uh,
don't.
yeah. So have you ever thought of completely swapping the genre and maybe trying to write an epic historical novel involving, I don't know, Elizabeth Tudor or Elizabeth the First or Queen Victoria, perhaps?
I think I wouldn't mind. I could write something, you know, in the Victorian period. I've got little interest in Tudor history or
How
medieval. I don't
so?
mind. I just, I mean, I'm a history teacher by trade, and so
Okay.
obviously I find the history fascinating, and I love teaching it, but I don't particularly want to write in that genre in that particular time period. I don't find it as fascinating. What I love about the 1800s in the UK was it was a time of very great change. If you look
Mhm,
at what the country was like at the beginning of the 1800s to the end,
mhm.
um, people had well, men certainly had the vote. They discovered that germs caused disease. They went from relying on horses to steam engines and the start of motor cars. You
Yeah, the
know, it
Industrial
really
Revolution
was.
for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just find it a fascinating period. I mean, politically, how we didn't have a massive like French style revolution is a mystery to me because all of the ingredients were there for massive civil unrest and there was unrest, but it kind of worked its way out in that strange British way that we have. So as a time period, I find the 1800s really, really interesting. Less so the Tudor period, less
Okay.
so medieval. I think if I'm going to
More
pivot
violent,
and
let's
trying
say.
to, I'm trying to do a bit of a pivot just to do something else for me. I would not stop writing my historicals, but I am writing a contemporary rom-com. I think my voice is very naturally rom-commy, even when I'm not trying to be. I think it's the British sense of humour. But yeah, I'm having a go at writing a contemporary rom-com at the moment, but no desire. I mean, I don't think a rom-com would work in Tudor times, to be perfectly
Yeah.
honest with you.
Well, it
Shakespeare did it.
depends.
Shakespeare did it, but I don't think, you know. don't think I can.
Like I was watching a Little Women once. It's a perfect adaptation to my mind. And Saoirse Ronan, she's also one of my favorite actresses. And she was asking advice from her fellow teacher, and who then became her husband. But they were having an argument over her writing, and he was like, "Well, your writing is not good, sorry, but I'm trying to be blunt." And she's like, "Yeah, but I'm no Shakespeare." And he's like, "Thank God we already have him," right? So
Yeah, no, absolutely.
yeah, but I think these days, no what few people actually write poems. I mean, like not like short poems, like epic stories, a
No, I think that's a kind of lost art.
plays.
Yeah, it's a bit of a lost art, but
It's a rarity, actually.
yeah. But Shakespeare wrote a good rom-com. One of my favorite
Yeah.
is I've completed Beatrice and Benedict. What's the name of that one? Oh,
Uh, oh, much ado about nothing,
that's
perhaps.
it. Much Ado About Nothing, which I love. And actually, I used that in. I don't know if you've read any of the other two books in the Merriwell sisters. You've read
Yep.
Never Fall for Your
Yep.
Fiance, but Much Ado About Nothing is the favourite book of the very academic sister in that book, and so she's
The
looking for
very
her.
shy one, yeah.
Yeah,
Who's
yeah,
17 years old, yeah. The one she's
yeah.
wearing
She's
glasses and
17
she's
in the
very
first book,
reserved, yeah.
but she's 23 by the time she gets her story, and she's obsessed with Benedict and Beatrice, and she's looking for her Benedict and looking in the wrong place.
She probably wants to work things work out the same way for her, right? Like, as way
Yeah,
they did in Machado about nothing.
yeah.
Okay. Let's switch a little bit from writing and discuss your spare time. So, what are your hobbies?
Obviously, I've said to you, I love to travel. That is a big thing that I like to do. I went to India at the beginning of this year. I'm going to Japan in a couple of weeks. I love adventuring in different countries. But also, I'm a big crafter. I love to make things. So
Mhm.
I like to
DIY
sew.
person.
Yeah, I like to sew. I can crochet. I can knit.
Mm.
I can draw a little bit. Anything creative, I'll give it a go. And I really enjoy making things with my hands. It uses a different part of your brain to writing. And it's a really excellent way to kind of work out where you're going to go next in your writing is by doing something physical with your hands. So I love to craft.
So, and what inspires you in daily life? What helps you to keep going no matter what?
Um, I'm naturally quite disciplined about my work. And because I'm disciplined about it, I mean, obviously, I have book contracts and things like that that I have to fulfill, but I very much treat my work as a job. So I'll be at my desk at nine o'clock. I'll take a couple of breaks during the day. I'll normally finish around 4.
Mhm.
Um, but I suppose what keeps me going is I really enjoy life. I love writing. I love doing what I do. I think I'm very, very privileged to do it. I used to love teaching. That was another thing that was good to get me out of bed in the morning. I love just the variety of life, going to different places, talking to different people. Um, I've always been the sort of person that volunteers for things. So for
Mm,
quite a few
same
years,
here, yeah.
yeah, I
Initiative is everything, right?
yeah, no, absolutely. So for quite a few years, I've only recently stopped, but I organised a lot of things for the Romantic Novelists Association here in the UK, which is an organisation for
Mhm.
all writers of romance, wherever
Okay.
they are in the world,
So it's
but
like
we're
a union of writers, let's say.
exactly, but writers of specifically romance
Okay.
in all its
Regency romance or romance in general? Okay.
every sort of romance. And so I used to organise their parties, and then that kind of spiraled, and I became a director of it. And then I organised their conference twice for 2 years in a row for like 250 writers in an academic setting in a university.
Hmm.
And so I like to do that. And I help organise the London chapter of the writers. So we meet every 6 to 8 weeks in a pub in London and have a lovely afternoon just talking about writing things.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds like a very nice time spending. We
Yes,
all
that
need
is.
something to, to draw inspiration from, to look after something, to organize things. Like it's your baby, right?
Yeah, no, it is. And I don't think anybody understands what it's like to write other than another writer. You know, my husband, bless him, is so supportive, but he judges, he kind of judges how well I'm doing by how many words I've done in a day.
Mm.
And that isn't the way it goes, because you can write a lot of words and then delete them all the next day because they're not the right words.
Yeah,
Um,
you will have a blank page.
Yes, and I think only other writers like understand that. You can just walk into the room with them and they say, "How are you doing?" and go, "I'm stuck in this book." And they go,
Yeah, it's a dead end.
"Yeah." And then they'll talk to you about it and go, "Where are you stuck? Why do you think you're stuck? What's," and it really kind of helps.
So that leads me to my next question. What helps you to get out of a writing slump?
Oh dear. I don't tend to have writing slumps. What I tend to get is I write myself into a corner. I write myself into a dead end and then I get stuck. And
You
because I
hit the
can't,
wall, yeah?
yeah, yeah. And because I can't plot, I've tried, it doesn't work. My brain writes the story live as I kind of see and hear it in my head like a film. And so that's all well and good when that film is running correctly, but then suddenly I'll go the wrong way. And actually, I think sometimes my brain's a bit like a computer, when a computer backs up in the background, and I'll wake up and I'll think, no, I'm going to do this. No, I'm going to do that. And I just keep going and going and going and going and going. And then one day I'll wake up and it'll be right. Oh God, I know where I've gone wrong. And I'll delete about 20,000 words and the film will restart and I can go
I
again.
totally agree. I totally agree because with me it's the same when I was writing my book. It took me 2 years actually um from the like early stages where there was simply an idea, a glimpse in my head of what I want to do. I was watching the Have you read Agatha Christie's novel The Pale Horse?
No, I've not read that one. I've read a lot of Agatha Christie though. She's very good.
It's a very rare novel as I can see because even my like social circle, my friends, a lot of them are true fans, Agatha Christie's true fans. Like
And they've not
The
seen it.
Pale Horse? No, I haven't read it. So yeah, I was watching the Amazon adaptation with Rufus Sewell. Do you know this actor?
I do, yes.
He played Lord Melbourne in Victoria.
Yeah,
Also one of my top favorite shows, honestly.
that's very.
Um, and the idea sparked right from there because I was like, okay, I would like to tell a story where the protagonist is this classy uh, British gentleman with refined manners and beautiful speech. Because what I like about British English in particular, I'm not a fan of American, sorry, um, it's like a melody, like a classical music to me. You listen to it, and in an instant, speaking of the intonation, it changes
Hmm,
constantly. And, it's just such aesthetically pleasing listening to this flow of speech.
yeah.
And I don't know why, but hearing English for me is much more pleasant and easier when men speak. I don't know why. So when women, actresses, I mean actresses, when women speak, it's sometimes harder than usual. But with men, it's like, okay, things are getting clear now. And even when I was reading your books, I was imagining the male characters, and I was like, okay, so who could possibly, out of British characters, portray this guy? and like imagining this low, beautiful, velvet voice, because most of British actors, for some reason, they have these velvet voices. Even Colin Firth, his voice is very low, let's say.
Yeah. It's
So,
funny you should say that because when Never Fall for Your Fiance in America, the audiobook, I get narrator approval. And I decided with the audiobook to have like the dual point of view. So the man reading from the man's point of view and
mhm.
a woman reading from the woman's point of view. And they sent me this whole kind of list of like voice actors to listen to. And I could spot a fake British accent 100 miles away. It just
Hey,
didn't sound right. And what you were saying about the intonation and like the way certain things would be said,
like up and
in that,
down, up and down.
yeah. But also like sometimes the Brits, we use one word as a full sentence. So
Yeah.
for Hugh in that book, it was excellent. Excellent. And that's how he would say it. And all these actors who are very, very good actors, but they were American and English wasn't the way they thought. They'd say that word wrong. And it was the one word that really jarred. And I ended up picking the two out of the whole lot that really were English. And weirdly, what you were saying about my accent being obviously from London, they're from close to London.
Okay.
Both the actors and that are Hugh and Minerva in that book, because it didn't sound right otherwise to me.
I think if Hugh Grant were way younger these days, he would probably portray Hugh. Why not? Because he has this, maybe I'm sounding a little bit banal, but to me, he's this typical British, well-mannered, nice guy.
Yeah, yeah. No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, but actually, there are countless actors who are very talented, and it's always, I
I
think,
think
as an
it,
author, it's difficult to choose if you are
yeah,
offered an adaptation. So
yeah. I think a younger Jude Law in my head
yeah,
was more Hugh.
definitely, definitely. Or maybe Benedict Cumberbatch. Why not?
Maybe,
I
yeah.
think he would have betrayed his friend. Okay, the other question I wanted to ask is about not like time traveling. Let's say that you can travel inside one of your stories. Which story would it be? Which one would you pick up, and which one would you like to end up as a character of? Let's say,
Oh my
and
goodness,
why?
that's such a hard, hard question. I think whichever story I'm writing is probably the world that um, I want to go back to. Um, but I think if there's one particular book, which I think for me was a real, like, important story that I told, it would be I'd go back to the time of the Discerning Gentleman's Guide, which
Oh, yeah.
which was the first book that I was shortlisted for the Romantic Novel of the Year of the Wood for. But it was also the first book, I think, that it just wanted to write itself. How some books are easy, some books are hard. That one literally just wrote itself. And I remember when I sent it into my editor, normally I'll get like edits and revisions. I had none with that story.
Okay.
Um, and I just think that, you know, the difference between that Duke, that stuck-up Duke who wrote a book that became a bestseller called The Discerning Gentleman's Guide to Selecting a Perfect Bride. Um, he is my Mr. Darcy.
Okay.
Everything about him, he is Mr. Darcy. And, he's very stiff and staid and pompous on the outside. But his feelings, he talks about, they're bubbling up inside him like a volcano.
But he's
And
vulnerable inside, actually.
yes,
So.
absolutely.
And
Yeah,
we
I
all
think,
keep a facade, to
yeah,
try
But I
to
think,
conceal true feelings because sometimes it might be painful from when someone sees you from the outside that something's wrong with you. Like it's better to
yeah,
confine them.
yeah. But I think that was kind of like, I think that's the book where I really discovered actually I have a rom-com voice, and a rom-com doesn't always have to be all jokes. It doesn't always have to be funny and fast. It's light and dark, black and white, shades of grey. And you can't have funny without the sad and the poignant.
Yeah.
You have to have both, otherwise it just doesn't work. And I think that was, for me, The Discerning Gentleman's Guide is the book where I found Virginia Heath as the writer. And I don't think my writing voice has changed much since then.
So this is the book filled with your voice, let's say,
Yeah, I think
out of
so. And
all other books. Yeah.
yeah, I just, not out of all other books, I just think that is the book that um
Mirrors you. Yeah.
yes, where I felt like the shoes I was wearing felt comfortable is the best way to describe it. It was like,
Okay.
okay,
Not
this is how
tight,
I'm,
not too big.
yeah, like this is how I'm meant to sound. So from that one book, that's where like all of these others have come from. And I've
Yeah,
got
this is
more,
my favorite actually, because when I was reading it, I couldn't stop smiling, and like my lips eventually and my entire mouth started to ache because like
oh,
it
well,
was
that does
so
make me
funny,
happy.
so funny. And I, at one point, I thought, okay, that's the way I'd like to write when I come up with a rom-com, let's say.
Yeah.
So that's something that
It just,
resonated within me, let's say.
yeah, I just think that's where I found my rom-com voice. That's where I really felt comfortable. And getting an award nomination, I know awards mean nothing, and I've never won one. I've been shortlisted many times, but I've never won one. But it was kind of validation as well from readers, and it was kind of like,
Acknowledgement, right?
yeah, like, okay, you can do this. You're on the right track. And so yeah, that book holds a very special place in my heart. And it's also, I think, the book where I learnt how to play with side characters to kind of cause those, because there's some really great side characters in that, from the women that he thinks he should marry to the lady who the woman that he ends up with she's the lady's companion, to this crotchety old lady who interferes with everything. They just all worked.
Have you ever thought of coming up with retelling? Because these days retellings are very, very, let's say, popular and in the spotlight. So have you ever thought of
Yeah,
coming up with your own?
I play around often with hints of a retelling. So, for example, Never Fall for Your Fiance is, I have a great love for Oscar Wilde
Yeah.
and the importance of being earnest,
Yeah, my favorite one. Yeah, a very
where he's two
perfect.
different people and he has this whole kind of fake life and real life. That was very much the inspiration of Never Fall for Your Fiance. Much Ado About Nothing was very much the idea between Never Wager with a Wallflower, because Beatrice and Benedict hate each other all the way
Yeah,
through the play, but they don't really hate each other. Everyone can see that they're perfect for one another. So that was kind of
they knew
um
all along that
but
they will end up together deep inside, you know?
yeah, this one came out last year, All's Fair in Love and War.
Yeah.
This is a little bit of a nod to My Fair Lady. The idea of a very stiff, pompous, and a very sort of lower class. So this whole series are the Miss Prentice's Protégés series. So the new one comes out next month. So that's what that one looks like next to it. These are all women who
This
have
is a
gone.
duology, yeah?
It's a quartet actually. So there'll be
Oh, okay.
so the All's Fair in Love and War is first. Look Before You Leap is second. I've just finished writing Pride Comes Before a Fall, which is the academic one. And then the last book of the series will be called Practice Makes Perfect. So I picked like British sort of proverbs as
Yeah.
the titles. But yeah, so there's always a kind of sometimes a little, so this is very kind of My Fair Lady, Pygmalion, that kind of vibe of a lady's companion and a gentleman. So in the whole of this series, the women are lowborn, the men are highborn, and it's kind of like how these governesses and ladies' companions and social secretaries end up with the boss, I suppose.
Yeah, and when in this particular book, I mean the first in the quadrilogy, right? So, I'm sorry, can you remind me the name once again? The
All's
first
fair
one.
in love and
Yeah,
war.
all spa yeah, yeah, yeah. When I was reading it, sorry, I'm very bad with names. Um,
Harry and Georgie are the
yeah,
characters.
I found that you were trying to say that at the time for a woman it was really difficult not simply to find a job, but to like there were certain standards set up and they had to meet these standards. And if she starts
Yeah.
to speak up for herself, she might meet hostility, like the
And that was the whole point in that book. She was a governess who couldn't keep her mouth closed, so she couldn't keep a job. Um, and in the one that comes out next month, this one, Look Before You Leap,
yeah.
Lottie is a lady's companion who prefers to ride horses really fast. So that urge for her to be a bit of a tomboy, to go off and, you know, just enjoy life, is quite difficult because she's expected to be obedient and, you know, well behaved and quiet and reserved and demure, and she's none of those things. So it's quite good to play with those things.
And what's currently on your TBR? Because as a writer, you have to consume a lot of books yourself because somewhere you draw inspiration from. Some books might help to fuel your language, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah, no,
what's
I know what
currently
you
on
mean.
your TBR?
So I kind of, I'm weird. If I'm writing a book, I can't really read in the same genre. It has to be something completely different. So at the moment, at the top of my, well, I've just started it, is Wild and Wrangled by Lila Sage, which is a Western contemporary romance.
Okay.
And it's book 4 in her Rebel Blue Ranch series. And I've really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed book 1. I really enjoyed book 3. Book 2, not so much, but this is book 4, so it's the kind of end of the series, so we'll see where it goes. Um, I'm also I've been reading. I went back and I've been rereading Julia Quinn's Bridgerton actually,
Yeah.
because um, I've loved the TV series. I think you have to take them as two separate entities. I've loved the TV series, but the
Usually
thing that
adaptations are
first,
completely different. Yeah.
yeah, the thing that first got me into sort of Regency romance in the sort of modern sense of a Regency romance was accidentally ending up with a Julia Quinn book, The Duke and I, because I'd run out of contemporary romances to read that were in my small bookshop and library where I lived. So I'm kind of rereading those, and it's fun to kind of see where my love of it as a reader started, but also that those books, and they were very much the kind of laid the foundation stones for me becoming a writer of those sorts of books. I'd always wanted to be a writer, but I was convinced that I was going to write contemporary romance. So, which as a history teacher, history was my job, I suppose, so I didn't tend to read it. And then I discovered the Bridgerton books, and it was like, oh, hang on a second. This has got all of the romance vibes I love without being a history lesson as well. The
Yeah.
history is the backdrop. So, yeah, I've been rereading those as well.
So you mentioned teaching. So what made you change the tide of your life, let's say? Why have you decided to quit your job?
Um, from it says in my bio, and it's absolutely true. When I was a little girl, I used to make up stories in my head because I couldn't go to sleep. And so I would stare at the ceiling and I would make up these stories in my head for as long as I can remember. So I think the urge to be a storyteller I was born with it. But I grew up in a working class family,
Mhm.
and my parents, when I said I wanted to be an author, they laughed at me. And they also laughed at
Seriously?
me and they also laughed at me when I said I wanted to be a teacher. And they were
What's wrong
like,
with being a teacher?
I don't think they had those sorts of aspirations, the idea of me going to university, all of those things. I don't think they ever had those aspirations. I think they wanted me to learn to type so as I could become a secretary. And so I kind of, it was always bubbling away, and it was kind of like there in the back of my mind. And when I had my daughter, going back many, many years ago, I wanted a job that I could do while, so as I could be around for my children. And I thought, well, maybe I'll give that teaching thing a go. That was my second dream.
Okay.
Um, so I went to university in my 30s and I got my degree and I became a teacher and I absolutely loved it. But in the back of my head, the storyteller was still there. And so there came a point, I think, I used to say to my students all the time, I'm going to write a book one day, I'm going to write a book one day. And one of my students said to me, and I taught him for a lot of years, and he went, oh God, you always say that. You always say that. It's never going to happen, And then it was quite a
But he
seminal moment.
proved to be wrong, right?
Yeah, because I kind of went, hang on a sec. Nobody believed I could become a teacher, and I did, and I was a really good one. So perhaps I can be an author. So I had a couple of goes at it, but teaching is an all-consuming job, and there's nothing left over for you to do anything. And then one day, particularly hard day in school, a long day, I just thought I don't want to do this anymore. I want to write. So rather like recklessly, I wrote my letter of resignation and decided, well, let's give it a go. Let's see if I can get myself published. And I did. I got myself published within 18 months. But I think I always say to my kids, I've never kind of said that their dreams aren't attainable because I firmly believe that dreams are. I believe the glass is always half full, and if you keep going at something, you will get there. And I was determined to be a writer from a little girl. And in a way, people saying to me that it would never happen spurred me on. It's what made me a teacher, and it's what made me a writer.
There's a phrase in English which I actually heard in another film. I can binge on a film or a TV show, honestly. This is my, let's say, guilty pleasure. So I was watching a film, an adaptation of Victor Frankenstein, a very Frankenstein story. I mean, the film is called Victor Frankenstein. It's
Yeah,
very, let's say, they have it's an American film, but in a very set in a very British manner, let's say.
mhm.
But it has been recrafted a lot. And there is this phrase, improbable, yes, impossible, no, when he was trying to prove
Yeah,
that creating a man, why not?
yeah,
Let's do it. So improbable, yes, impossible, no. And this is my life motto now. So
yeah. I just think I'm so glad that I didn't let people put me in the box that they thought I should be in, because um, I was meant to write books. That's what I was meant to do. And that's the way my brain works. And I think, I'm okay at it.
and you are an author now. So everyone
I am.
who claimed that, okay, you'll never make it, they proved to be wrong. So
Yeah, 32 books later, here I am.
yeah, that's perfect. That's my dream, actually. 32 books.
I know. I know. It's quite a lot.
Yeah, so you mentioned the publishing process, right? So, what advice would you give if an aspiring author comes to you, for instance, and asks guidance concerning publishing process?
I would say to them that it is a long game. You're not going to get published straight away. Chances are you're going to get knocked down a lot of times before you actually manage to do it. But I think persistence is the key. You have to keep going. And if the first book doesn't make it, that's fine. Write another one. And if that doesn't make it, write another one. And each time you write a book, you will get better at it and better and better. And it might not be good enough to publish now, but that doesn't mean that you're not good enough to publish one day. So you've just got to keep on at it. And the other piece of advice I would give them is to read extensively, especially the sort of books that you want to write. And if you find a book that you love after you've read it for pleasure, go back through it and make notes about what the author did, how they did it, what was so great about it. And do the same if you find a book that you didn't like. Go back through it. Why didn't this work for you? What was missing? And you'll learn, each book you write, each book you read will teach you something.
Yeah, so the other advice that they might ask you, so how to write from the scratch. So the person has never experienced writing, but they really aspire to. They have this strong ambition. So how to write a story from the scratch if you've never been involved in this industry, let's say.
So long as you've been a reader, then I would say, it always starts. Writers aren't born writers, they're born readers, and then they develop into writers. But I would say a journey of 1,000 miles starts with a single step. Don't plan to write a book straight away. Maybe just write a diary, write a little story about something that's happened to you over a couple of pages. Start small, build it up, build it up, build it up. A book is a daunting thing to do at the beginning.
Terribly daunting.
It is to put a document together that's filled with about 100,000 words is a hard thing to do. And lots of people can write chapter 1 and chapter 2, but it takes determination and actually a refusal to not give up, that allows you to still be writing at chapter 15 when things are really tricky and you don't know where it's going. You've got to be disciplined. You've got to write every single day, write something every single day. Terry Pratchett, who obviously was a very prolific writer, he said that every single day he wrote 400 words, no more, no less. That's all he would write, 400 words, which is about the same sort of length as a long email. And he said, if you write 400 words every single day without fail, at the end of the year, you will have a book.
So you can have even a plot of your own inside your head and write 400 words, trying to explore the story, to metamorphose it, right, to change it.
Yeah. You could just write the next scene, the next scene, the next scene, or part of the next scene in your 400 words. But you're not going to do anything if all you do is talk about it and think about it. You've actually got to sit down at some point and start writing it.
Do you prefer typing or manual writing? Because to me, manual writing is more inspirational, let's say, and I get a boost when writing with my hands, let's say.
I think if you speak to like 1,000 writers, you'd get 1,000 different answers. For me, I type. And I type because I can type and not think about it. And because I see the story like a film in my head, I see it happening live. I see it, I hear it. It's it's all going on in my head
That's a
when I'm
superpower,
typing.
actually.
I know it's weird. I know. I don't think I've ever met a writer that's got exactly the same process as me. So I'm sat here at my computer. I probably wouldn't even be looking at the screen, but my fingers are typing out what's happening. That's how I write. So for me, typing does that. If I was to handwrite it, that would mess with my process, I think. It just doesn't work. And I did have a little go at like narrating it, dictating it. Didn't work for me either. I've got to be, this film is going on in my head. My hands are working independently, but they're actually transcribing what this organ up here is weaving.
Yeah, and speaking of language, as a linguist, I'm very interested in the way English changes from year to year. And I really enjoy Philip Pullman's work. Have you read any of his books? The
A long time
Golden.
ago, I read one of his, but not for many years.
So I happened to read the book that contained his essays, and in one of the essays, he claimed that English used to be a dense forest. Wherever you go, you see these beautiful, thick trees. And I don't remember when the book was published, 2019, I suppose. Yeah, and he claimed that these days, unfortunately, the language is like a forest, so it's getting thinner and thinner and thinner, and you can only see no longer the trees, but what's left of them. So, and that's what's happening with English. Do you agree with this opinion?
Oh, I don't actually. I think all language evolves over time. Um, Shakespeare made up his own words, and now they're part of common English. Uh,
Definitely.
and I think new words come and old words no longer become relevant. You can't be describing having words that describe manual like farming that have no relevance in a modern technological age. I think language evolves and people evolve. But I do think that in books especially and any sort of writing, the joy of reading is reading, as you say, the poetry of the written word. And I
Intricate
don't think,
language. Yeah.
yeah, and I don't think anyone would get published if they only used a very like limited number of words. So I believe language evolves. Sometimes like the whole world evolves, and it's progress, and we do things differently, and the art of letter writing is dead, but the art of writing a good script remains. As society moves on, certain things get parked, and that's fine. That's what progress is about. It goes back to my analogy about the City of London with the modern
Yeah.
and the art hand in hand. We keep what we need to, and we invent what we need.
So you mentioned screenwriting. Which of your novels are you most thrilled to see adapted to screen, and what would be your dream casting?
Oh my goodness. Any of them. I'd like any of them to be adapted to screen. Um, but I think that I don't know, that's a really hard one. I think whichever series I'm working on, I'd love to see adapted. And who is my dream cast? I don't know. I never have kind of like an image of an actor in my head when I'm writing. That the
Vice
character,
versa, because to
yeah,
me, imagining people is a tricky thing. I don't know why,
yeah.
but like
But then that's because
interior
I see it.
design, that's yes, that's okay. But with
Yeah,
people, tricky.
yeah. But I think that's because I see them in my head. So, they're kind of fully formed in my head. Um, but yeah, I don't know. I think I'd like to see my Merriwell sisters on
All
film.
three of them.
All three of them, yeah, one
Okay.
after the other, because I think as a series, you know, they're three very different books, three very different sisters, but that there's some characters that feature in all of them. Um, And who would I have? I don't know who I would cast. I honestly don't know who I would cast.
Maybe have someone you have a soft spot for.
Oh my goodness, yeah, of course I do. But I feel that the people that I have a soft spot for now as an older woman, like you're saying, the Hugh Grants, the Colin Firth, they're too old to play my characters now. Um, they would have to be, it would have to be younger actresses.
We can
I,
alter their age, perhaps,
yeah,
in
maybe, but
script.
I do kind of think as well that what I do is I write the books, I write the story. And I think if they were to be made into any sort of thing for film or television, then I think that it's for whoever is talented at making those things to interpret it how they see fit, and to choose who they feel that the characters would be. Um, I, I, yeah, I don't have a dream cast. Just don't, because to me, the characters are already real in my head, so it would be very weird for me to cast them.
Okay, just three more questions. The one question concerning your book. So your romantic tension in chemistry is mind-blowing, and I must say that they do not spoil the entire plot and the impression of the book, because to my mind, some books, unfortunately, they happen to be overloaded with romantic tension. So how can an author balance a good plot and this romantic tension?
I think the key to romantic tension is to understand what's going on in a character's head. Where have they been? What have they been through? That shapes how they react. If you understand how your character thinks, and you've got that with both characters, and you find that is where the tension lives. So, for example, if I take this one, All's Fair in
Okay.
Love, as an example. Um, Georgie was brought up with a stepfather who was a military man, who was very
He
cold.
was a tyrant, actually.
Yes, he was. He was like horrible. She hated the idea of children being seen and not heard. She hated his military strictness. It's made her quite rebellious, very outspoken. Harry is a military man, so Georgie loves chaos. He grew up in chaos,
Restricted.
and he loves order. And so straight away, before these two people open their mouths, you've already got attention there. You know, it's natural and
It's in the air. Yeah.
it's in the air. So you've got to think of, I like to think of my characters like magnets. Something is drawing them together. Fate,
Opposites attract, right? So
yeah, fate is drawing them together, but the baggage that they carry is keeping them apart. So if you think of when you put two magnets together the right way, they stick. But if you twist them round and you try and push them together, the magnets, there's that tension, isn't there, in the air, because they don't, that is what you need to create. And you can't do that unless you know how your characters think and why they think that way.
so not simply romantic tension out of romantic tension, just to put it there. You have to have a reason to put it there.
Yes, it has to, everything has to have a reason. Everything has to have a reason, because attraction is one thing, but um resistance is something completely different, and you've got to balance those two things. You've got to play with it, and nothing should ever come too easily. You can throw obstacles in the way that make them react in a way how you know that they're going to react, but their reactions are probably going to outrage each other. So yeah, you know your characters, be inside their head. Why do they think the way they think?
And what's your opinion of social media? Has it imposed certain standards of people that they're trying to follow? Have people become more isolated and reserved because of social media, like forgetting what life is going? on around them, just being more indifferent?
I think I don't know. I think it's an interesting question. I think social media is good for a lot of things, and I think it's also very bad for a lot of things.
Intoxicating.
Yeah, I think so. And um, I think in all things there needs to be balance, and I think you need to know what you want out of social media. If you make social media your life, I think that's a very dangerous thing. Obviously, I have a social media presence. I have to, it's part of
As an
my job.
author, yeah.
Yeah, to be there. And I try to make it an authentic presence. I don't use filters and things like that to make myself look
Neither do
different,
I. Yeah.
better. But I'm a version of myself on social media. I'm I you know I don't have any controversial opinions on social media. What I'm there for is to talk about books and history and romance. And to watch dog videos. I am not there. I am not there to try and put the world to rights. I am not there to upset anyone, or I'm not interested in having an argument with somebody on social media. I like to see bits of it, and the bits I like, and I'll avoid the bits I don't like the plague.
So when reasonably maintained, it works out.
Yeah, I think so. I think it's in a way it's almost like the newspapers of the time, isn't it? It kind of you can see what's happening in the world. By social media. You learn things. I follow, I can't think of her name right now, but I follow a British science professor, and she's just fascinating. Like, I learn things from her. Different historians I follow that I learn things from. Um, I like to catch up with people. It's good for certain things. And like I say, I have limits on my phone, set on my phone, saying you have been on social media now for 25 minutes. It's time to shut the program down. And
So
I
it
think,
reflects your social media presence, how in percentage. Yeah.
yeah, and I think I try and post stuff on there regularly, but sometimes I'm not in the mood to post, and so I don't. So I
We all do.
don't get hung up about it. I don't care if hundreds of people like what I've got to say, or three. I don't particularly care. I try and be honest on my social media, but I try and keep it specific as well.
And the last question, which I usually terminate my conversations with, because each and every person I interview, they have a completely different opinion on this. So we as humanity, we have witnessed so many historical periods, epochs like Renaissance, Enlightenment, Romanticism. How would you characterize the 21st century? How is it different from all the previous epochs?
I think the 21st century is a bit like the 18th and 19th centuries, just
Okay.
faster. Uh,
Aha.
I think the 19th century is, touched on it before, where I said I think it was very much a time of change, and change change is often gradual, but it's never a curve. There's always something happens, and there's always something that kicks that change off. So if I give you a classic example, um, wars, they do bad things, but they do good things. So from World War II, we got penicillin, which wouldn't
Yeah.
have been pushed the way it had if it hadn't have happened. Um, I think that as the world gets more technologically advanced, I think those peaks and troughs come quicker. And I think they don't necessarily come quicker, but I think we perceive them to come quicker because phones, we're always close to a telephone, and news is instant, and we're
Split
surrounded by
thinking.
information. So I think it appears like it's happening fast, but I think that we're in a time of transition, of great change. And as in all, the historian in me is saying, as in all periods of great change, there's a lot of good and a hell of a lot more bad. And I think
Definitely.
that we're kind of in that now. And also, if you follow things through history, after something bad has happened to humanity, there is always a period of social unease and unrest. And we've just come out the back of a pandemic. So it doesn't surprise me that, the world is a little bit up and down in the air, because after World War One, there was a pandemic, and then the 20s and 30s were periods of depression and growing nationalism
Yeah.
across Europe. And I see those things mirroring, but that's what they did it in medieval times when Black Death came, and loads of people died. After it, in British history, there was the Magna Carta, period of social unrest where the population. So these things, history does repeat itself. Um, but I think in the modern world, we're more aware of it, the 21st century, because information is so readily available. If you didn't know something in the 1800s, you probably would die not knowing it, or you'd have to travel somewhere and find a library. Now, if you
But
don't know
people were
something,
less unsettled and less anxious because they were not
yeah,
overloaded with some information
yeah,
we don't really need. We just
yeah. I
consume
read a
it in a great amount.
I
So,
read an interesting statistic actually last year, and it did blow my mind a little bit. And it said that the average person nowadays is bombarded with more information in a single week than a
yeah,
person living in 1820 had in their entire life.
I liked the way you put it, bombarded. That's for
Yeah.
sure.
And I think when you're being bombarded with all of these things, it's very difficult to be reflective.
You have to dodge all the time. Yeah,
Yeah, it's very difficult to kind of take that pause and go, well, hang on a minute, this is happening. How do I feel about it? Everything's sped up.
I agree. So, in 18th plus 19th century, but dramatically sped up.
Yes, exactly. We're in a period of human progress is humans have always made progress, mostly. Sometimes we go
Mostly,
backwards,
yeah.
but we mostly make progress. And I think since the 1800s, that progress has been getting rapider and rapider and rapider, you know. I just think that, and that's down to technology, and it's down to education, it's down to good things. Um, the problem is I don't think the world, humans, have quite caught up with being able to process it correctly yet.
We have to learn how to weight these things correctly.
Yeah.
Right. Virginia, thank you very much for being here today. It was such a fruitful conversation full of interesting insights, and I'm feeling like I'm being filled with so much positive energy. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you. I like to keep positive, and thank you for talking to me. It's been really
Thank you very
interesting.
much. I wish you luck with your upcoming novel. It's
Thank
going to be
you.
published in June, am I right?
Yes, look before you leave, 24th of June. And this is another one of those books that wrote itself.
So I hope that your head will be full of new ideas, that you will get a stream of ideas and it never stops. And I wish you all the best with anything you'd like to work on and start.
Thanks, and good luck with your book career.
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Bye.
If you enjoyed the episode, don't forget to subscribe, review, and share the podcast with your friends. Thanks very much for listening.